Maya stood in the small dressing room of the courthouse bridal suite, with the harsh neon light humming above her and the mirror staring back as if it were judging every inch of her exposed skin. She breathed slowly, but the air felt thin as her fingers hovered over the zipper of the high-neck wedding dress provided by the agency. The dress was designed to hide everything, yet even the heavy satin could not silence the memories pressed beneath her scarred skin. When she finally pulled the zipper up, a sharp sting traveled along the long burn line that ran from her ribs to her hip, and she winced while forcing herself not to cry. She steadied herself with one hand on the counter. There was no makeup artist, no bridesmaid, no mother adjusting her veil. Only the fluorescent hum and her reflection that looked like a ghost wrapped in white. In another part of the building, 2 floors above, Elias Gray sat alone in a private conference suite meant for donors of the courthouse renovation. The room was all glass and chrome, and too bright for someone who barely slept. In his hand, he held a charred ring box with a half-melted engagement ring. Inside, the last object rescued from the fire that had killed his former fiancée 3 years earlier. He closed the box with a slow, careful motion, as if touching a living wound. The air in the room carried the faint scent of smoke, only in memory, yet he could feel it like a shadow against his lungs. He set the box on the table and stared out toward the city, where the winter sky had turned the skyscrapers into silver blades, rising in the cold. Their lives were about to collide because both of them needed something that resembled survival. Maya needed money to finish her medical debt and to pay for physical therapy for the nerve damage left from the assault that had nearly ended her life. Elias needed to be married before his 37th birthday if he wanted to retain control of the Pediatric Innovation Fund, named after his late fiancée, a condition set by her parents who believed marriage would anchor him again. Neither of them wanted love. Neither believed they deserved it. The agency contract spelled everything out in sterile legal phrasing, a marriage partnership, strictly without physical expectations or romantic entanglements. Elias had insisted on that clause not out of cruelty, but because he had not touched another person with intention in 3 years. Maya had signed it without hesitation, because touch had become something she feared more than she longed for. Now, as she checked the time on her phone, her hands trembling with a mix of dread and resolve, she whispered a silent reminder. "This is survival. You are doing this to live 1 more year without drowning." Her heart thudded against her ribs. She stepped back from the mirror, adjusted the high collar that hid the raised ridges of her injury, and forced her spine straight. Down the hall, Elias walked toward the private elevator that would take him to the small courtroom. He moved like a man, carved from stone, tall, controlled, silent. His assistant had tried to offer a boutonniere, a tradition he brushed off with a polite "no thank you." He could not bear anything that resembled a celebration. Today was an obligation, a transaction with a human cost he tried not to think about. Yet as he entered the elevator, he felt an ache in his chest at the thought of marrying a stranger and asking her to share the weight of his broken life. For a moment, he closed his eyes and saw fire. That night still lived in him, made of glass shattering and smoke curling through hallways, and the scream he never forgot. When the elevator doors opened, he exhaled slowly, letting the memories sink back into the place he kept his ghosts. In the dressing room upstairs, Maya placed her hand flat on the door, preparing herself to walk into a marriage she had never imagined, for a life she no longer recognized. In her mind, she saw the hospital room where she first woke after the assault. The pity in her nurses' eyes, the way her art professor never contacted her again, the silence from her mother. A stranger offered her a way out of the spiral, and she had said yes because she had no other choices left. She whispered her name quietly, as though reminding herself she was still someone. Maya Harlow, you are still here. Her reflection flickered in the neon light, her scar catching a sharp highlight along its uneven path, and she swallowed hard. She squared her shoulders, even though they trembled slightly beneath the fabric. One breath in, one breath out, she reached for the doorknob. At the same moment, Elias stepped into the small courtroom with 2 chairs, a judge, and a vase of artificial flowers meant to make the space feel warm. It did not. His hand brushed the charred ring box in his pocket, and he felt the weight of what he was about to do. Their lives would meet in the next minute, 2 strangers carrying wounds neither could see fully yet. Above him, Maya took her final breath and stepped forward, like a soldier crossing a line she could never uncross. The hallway stretched before her, bright, cold, and silent. She walked toward the ceremony with the resolve of someone walking onto a battlefield. She did not look back. The courtroom chosen for their ceremony was meant to feel elegant, but instead felt like a hollow imitation of celebration, with tall windows letting in pale winter light that washed the room in a sterile blue tone. There were rows of empty wooden chairs, polished but untouched, and the faint smell of floor cleaner lingered in the air, as if the room had been prepared for an audience that never arrived. Maya stepped inside quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, and her high-neck wedding dress hiding every line of damage beneath. For a second, she imagined that maybe one person would be there even by accident, an old classmate or someone who cared enough to witness her begin again. But the chairs remained empty, like a silent verdict. Elias stood near the judge, dressed in a dark tailored suit that made him look like a man carved from restraint. When he saw Maya enter, he offered a polite nod, but kept a noticeable distance between them, a small measured space that felt larger than the entire room. The judge, an older woman with a gentle voice, cleared her throat as if trying to soften the hollowness around them. She glanced at the empty chairs, but said nothing professional enough to conceal any reaction. Maya approached Elias and stood beside him, feeling the cold draft that seeped through the tall windows. Her fingers trembled slightly, and she tried to hide it by curling them into her palm. Elias noticed but did not comment. His eyes flickered over her dress, lingering for a second on the high collar, then quickly shifted away. He did not see the scars yet, but he saw the fear, the weight, and the quiet steadiness beneath it. As the judge began the ceremony, her voice echoed in the nearly empty courtroom. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The words sounded almost sarcastic without a single beloved soul present. Outside in the hallway, 2 hotel staff members wheeled a cart past whispering. Maya caught a sliver of their conversation through the barely closed door. She looks like the kind of bride chosen by desperation, not love. The sentence hit her with a sharp, invisible blow. Her throat tightened. She looked straight ahead, refusing to let anything show. Yet the words cut deep because they echoed what she had feared since the moment she agreed to the contract. Elias heard it too. His jaw tightened, but he remained still, not reacting, afraid that acknowledging it would make it worse. afraid that protecting her would feel like pity. Maya misunderstood the silence as agreement, as apathy, as confirmation of her worst suspicion that she was nothing more than a means to an end. The judge continued reciting the traditional vows, while Maya tried to breathe through the sudden ache behind her ribs. The fluorescent lights above flickered faintly, as if they too were unsure how to illuminate such a strange union. When it was time to exchange rings, Maya hesitated for half a second before lifting her hand. Elias slid the simple band onto her finger carefully, his touch barely grazing her skin. She felt how cold his fingers were, and wondered whether it was the room or the memories he carried. When she placed the matching band on his hand, his eyes met hers for the first time since she had walked in. There was something unreadable there, a mixture of resolve and hesitation, but also something darker, like a storm he kept chained inside. The judge closed the book with a soft thud. By the authority vested in me by the state of Massachusetts, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may. She paused, searching for the right word, as if evaluating whether it was appropriate. You may begin your partnership. No kiss, no applause, no families, no witnesses. Just a signature and the echo of the judge's voice dissolving into the cold courthouse air. After signing the documents, Maya stepped aside, waiting for Elias to finish his portion. She watched the way he held the pen steady, the way his hand stopped shaking, only when he focused on something precise. When they stepped out of the courtroom together, a photographer hired by the agency snapped a single picture for legal records. The flash hit Maya unexpectedly, and she flinched before collecting herself. The photographer glanced at her, then at Elias, and forced a professional smile. Congratulations. Elias nodded politely, but Maya looked away, unable to offer a response. Outside the courthouse, a sleek black town car waited for them, its engine humming softly. The city traffic surrounding them felt loud, chaotic, too alive for the stillness inside Maya's chest. As they walked toward the car, a journalist recognized Elias from afar and raised their phone, trying to get a shot. Security quickly stepped in, blocking them, but the journalist's voice carried across the street. Who is she, Elias? Who is the mystery bride? Is it true this is a marriage of convenience? The words struck Maya like cold rain. She kept her eyes straight ahead, her pace slow but steady. When they got into the car, Elias sat beside her, leaving the same few inches of space as before. She stared out the window, watching the courthouse fade behind them, while Elias stared at the city skyline. His thoughts far from the celebration this day was supposed to be. They spoke only once during the entire ride. Thank you for agreeing to this, Maya. His voice was low and controlled. She nodded but did not turn toward him. Thank you for keeping your promise. The silence settled back between them, an unfamiliar companion they would carry all the way to the penthouse, where their first night as husband and wife would pass with fewer than 5 sentences spoken. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt impossibly long, even though it lasted less than 40 seconds. Maya stood on one side of the mirrored interior, her reflection fractured into endless versions of herself, each one appearing more uncertain than the last. Elias stood on the opposite side, hands in his pockets, shoulders rigid, eyes fixed on the floor numbers as they ascended. Neither spoke. The silence between them felt like a physical barrier stretching wider with every passing floor. When the elevator doors opened to the 62nd level, a rush of cold air slipped into the space. The penthouse was enormous, almost museum-like, with high ceilings, polished glass surfaces, and windows that revealed the city glittering beneath a winter haze. But the space felt painfully empty. No photographs, no warmth, no trace of a life lived here beyond the minimal furniture. Maya stepped inside slowly, her heels tapping softly against the marble floor. The place echoed with each step, as if reminding her she did not belong. Elias walked ahead of her, switched on the overhead lights, and placed the key card on a console table. The lights were bright, too bright, illuminating the coldness of the room. He exhaled quietly and motioned toward a hallway on the right. "There is a guest room down here. You can take it?" His tone was polite, distant, and businesslike. Maya nodded. She expected this. The contract had been clear. Still, something inside her tightened at the confirmation. She followed him down the hallway, passing expensive art pieces she did not recognize, and noticing a faint scent of smoke lingering in the air. Not real smoke, but the ghost of memory someone carried everywhere. Elias stopped at a door and opened it, revealing a small, well-kept room with a neatly made bed and a soft lamp glowing on the nightstand. "You should be comfortable here. The bathroom is through that door. If you need anything, let me know." "Thank you," she said softly, stepping inside. Elias hesitated at the doorway, as if wanting to say something more but failing to find the words. After a moment, he nodded once, then walked away, leaving her alone in a space far too neat for a home and far too lonely for a marriage. Maya set her small suitcase on the bed and slowly unzipped it. She placed her folded clothes in the drawer, arranging them quietly, careful not to make noise. But noise or not, the silence of the penthouse seemed to swallow every movement. Eventually, she changed out of the wedding dress into a simple cotton shirt and leggings. The collar of the shirt was high enough to hide the worst of her scars. She washed her face, then paused in front of the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent light cast hard shadows along the jagged lines that ran down her side. She touched the scar lightly, flinching at the memory, not the pain. This was her life now. A stranger husband, a mansion without warmth, and a contract that promised safety but demanded nothing real. She turned off the light and stepped into the dark. Across the penthouse, Elias stood in his bedroom, staring at the framed photograph on the nightstand. It showed a woman with soft eyes and a bright smile, the fiancé he lost to the fire that consumed half their apartment. His fingers hovered over the frame, unable to touch it fully. He had thought time would dull the memory. It didn't. It only sharpened the guilt until it cut through everything else. The reflection in the window showed him a version of himself he did not recognize anymore. Hardened, locked, afraid to reach, afraid to break. He set the photograph down and sat on the edge of the bed. His mind kept drifting to Maya, standing beside him during the ceremony. Her posture rigid but dignified, the faint tremor in her hand, the pain she hid beneath layers of fabric and silence. She deserved better than a marriage based on deadlines and conditions. She deserved better than him. His chest tightened and he took a slow breath, trying to anchor himself in the present. But the present felt too close to the past, suffocating and sharp. He turned off the light. Later that night, Maya wandered into the kitchen, unable to sleep. She found a carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, and a coffee maker that looked far too expensive for basic brewing. She moved quietly, her footsteps soft on the cool marble as she tried to make herself useful. Cooking felt like the only thing she could control in a life slipping through her hands. She prepared scrambled eggs and toast, placing them on 2 plates. She hesitated, unsure whether to knock on Elias's door or leave the food on the counter. Ultimately, she left 1 plate on the island, wrote a small note, "Hope you ate something," and carried the other plate back to her room. The next morning, Elias found the note first, then the food. He stared at it for a long moment, the handwriting neat and careful, a gesture so small yet disarming. He picked up the plate. It was cold now, but he lifted the fork and took a bite anyway. Reminded suddenly of what it felt like to have someone care, even in the smallest way. Later, when Maya walked into the living area, Elias looked up from a document on his tablet. "You did not have to do that." His voice was steady, but his eyes held something softer. Maya nodded. "I know." That was all she said, yet the sentence carried layers of meaning. "I know I did not have to. I know you do not want it. I know this marriage is not real. I know we are 2 locked hearts pretending not to feel." Elias held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then turned back to his tablet, the emotional distance dropping back into place, like a steel door slamming shut. Maya walked to her room, feeling the weight of everything unspoken pressing against her ribs. The penthouse remained cold. The silence remained thick. But in the spaces between that silence, something fragile had begun to stir. Maya woke early the next morning, though she had barely slept. The penthouse felt colder than usual as she stepped into the wide-open living space, where the floor-to-ceiling windows cast long strips of pale light across the polished marble. She paused for a moment, taking in the silence, the kind of silence that did not feel peaceful, but measured, curated, a soundless world built by a man who no longer knew how to let sound in. She began moving through the space quietly, her fingers trailing along the glass dining table, the smooth surface of the minimalist white cabinets, the untouched sofa that looked more like a studio prop than a place where someone might rest. Everything was beautiful but empty. She opened the blinds wider, letting sunlight fall onto the floor, hoping it would warm the room even a little. Eventually, she tied her hair into a loose knot, rolled the sleeves of her cotton shirt, and began making small changes, planting the kind that breathed life into a place without disrupting its owner's boundaries. She added a small potted plant near the kitchen window, a vibrant green fern she bought with her own savings the day before the wedding. She rearranged the throw pillows on the couch into softer angles. She brewed coffee, letting the scent drift through the penthouse, small steps almost invisible, yet quietly rebellious, against the cold masculine order. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Elias was finishing the last of several early morning calls, the kind that dictated the future of his company. Gray Biotech was worth billions, but cracks were forming. Investors were nervous. Children's hospitals wanted more transparency, and an upcoming federal inspection would determine funding for the pediatric innovation program that bore his late fiancé's name. Still wearing his dress shirt from the night before, he rubbed his eyes exhausted. His assistant was asking about deadlines, shipments, conferences, but Elias could not fully focus. He kept thinking about the plate of scrambled eggs Maya had left him, the careful handwriting, the quiet gesture. Something about it unsettled him, like a memory of kindness he did not know how to receive anymore. When he stepped out of the bedroom, he paused. The penthouse looked different in a way he could not explain. Softer, warmer. The faint scent of coffee drifted toward him. Maya stood in the kitchen, back turned to him, pouring the steaming brew into 2 mugs. She looked small in the vast space, yet strangely centered like the eye of a storm. "Morning," she said without turning around. Her voice was soft but not timid. Elias approached slowly, as if afraid he might disturb something delicate. "Morning," he replied. He accepted the mug she handed him and took a sip. It tasted balanced, not too strong, not too sweet. "Thank you. You don't need to do this." Her lips curved almost into a smile. "I know." The unspoken truth returned between them. She knew she was not required to bring warmth into his life, but she did it anyway, because she needed something to anchor herself in this strange new existence. After breakfast, Elias left for Gray Biotech, with his usual schedule packed with meetings, investors, and crisis management. Maya watched him leave from the window, her expression unreadable. As the elevator doors closed behind him, she allowed herself a long exhale. She needed work, something to focus on, something that reminded her she was not here merely to fill silence. She found cleaning supplies tucked away in one of the hall closets and began wiping surfaces, polishing chrome fixtures, dusting shelves. She moved quietly through the place, making it breathe again. It was during this process that she found the first framed photograph. It was tucked in a drawer in the office, a picture of Elias standing beside a young woman who had bright brown eyes and a smile that seemed capable of softening even the hardest days. Maya lifted the frame, gently running her fingertips over the engraved initials at the bottom. She recognized the expression in Elias's eyes, the mixture of love and guilt and loss. She had seen that look before on herself, when she stared at her own reflection and remembered the person she used to be. Maya returned the photo carefully, then closed the drawer. Later that afternoon, while she was making tea, she checked her phone. There were dozens of unread messages, notifications, and tags from accounts she did not recognize. Someone on TikTok had uploaded a blurry courthouse photo titled, "Who is the billionaire's mystery bride, and why does she hide her face?" Comments were already flooding in. "She looks older than him. She looks sick. This has PR move written all over it. Something about her seems off." Maya felt a cold wave travel over her skin. She set down her phone, breathing slowly, trying not to let the words sink in. It was only day 2 of her marriage, and her image was already dissected by strangers who knew nothing about her. She walked to the window, trying to calm her nerves. But as she stared down at the busy city below, her vision blurred for a moment. A shooting pain radiated along the scar on her side, sharp and sudden. She grasped the back of a chair to steady herself, but her knees buckled slightly, and she sank to the floor, gasping quietly. She pressed her palm against her ribs, willing herself to stay calm. The nerve damage always flared up under stress, but she had hoped today would spare her. The elevator chimed unexpectedly. Elias stepped into the penthouse earlier than usual, loosening his tie. His eyes landed on her immediately. "Maya, are you all right?" She tried to stand, but her limbs trembled. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she clearly was not. Elias crossed the distance quickly, instincts overriding hesitation. His hand closed around her arm, helping her up gently, supporting her weight as she steadied herself. For a brief moment their bodies were close, his warmth grounding her, his breath uneven, as if the simple act of touching someone unsettled him. Then, without warning, he pulled back abruptly, his hand dropping away, as though burned by the contact. "Sorry," he muttered, voice tense. Reflex, Maya nodded, understanding more than she let on. "Thank you," she said. Her words were quiet but sincere. Elias looked at her for a long moment, his expression conflicted, like a man trying to reconcile the past with the present. "Let me know if you need anything," he said before stepping back, retreating into the controlled distance he knew best. Maya watched him walk toward his office, the brief moment of human closeness closing behind him like a door. The penthouse quieted again, but the air felt changed, not warmer but less frozen. In his world of glass, Maya had begun to leave fingerprints. The storm rolled into the city without warning, dark clouds swallowing the skyline as if night had arrived hours too early. Maya stood near the penthouse window, watching the first sheets of rain streak down the glass like cold silver veins. She had spent the morning avoiding the news, the comments, the hateful messages that kept popping up under the courthouse photo. Every time she tried to look away, another notification buzzed through her phone, like a reminder that strangers believed they had the right to judge her existence. She finally shoved the phone into her pocket and grabbed her coat. She needed air, even if it was cold and wet. She left quietly, not wanting to disturb Elias, who was locked in back-to-back meetings about an investor panic that had begun brewing since rumors of his marriage leaked online. The elevator hummed as it descended. When she reached the lobby, she pulled the hood of her coat over her head and stepped into the storm. The rain hit her immediately, soaking the fabric and chilling her skin through to the bone, but she welcomed it. The city around her blurred the streets, glistening as headlights smeared into streaks of gold and red. She walked with her hands buried in her pockets, head down, ignoring the stares of people recognizing her from the trending video online. She only wanted a simple coffee, something warm to hold, something ordinary. The small cafe 3 blocks down felt familiar, the kind of place where a barista remembered regulars' names. She ordered a latte, her voice barely above a whisper. The barista smiled with genuine warmth, not recognizing her, not seeing her scars, and not connecting her face to the online cruelty. Maya exhaled, relieved, but when she stepped back outside, the storm had worsened, and a man standing across the street lifted his phone, pointing it toward her. "Hey, isn't that her? The mystery bride, the pity wife." A second person joined him, raising their phone too. She turned away quickly, heart pounding. Someone shouted after her, "Why does she hide her face? If she married a billionaire, she should show it off." Maya picked up her pace, her breath shallow. The rain drenched her hair, her coat, her shoes soaking her until every step felt heavy. She reached the alley behind the penthouse tower where the service entrance was quieter. But 2 more photographers were waiting under the awning sheltered from the storm. One snapped a photo, the flash exploding in the dark. She flinched violently, feeling exposed, cornered. "Miss Harlow, is it true you're hiding scars? Is it true he only married you to secure investor sympathy?" The questions hit her harder than the rain. She backed away, shaking her head. "Please stop." She had not meant to sound desperate, but her voice cracked, betraying the panic she tried to bury. Another flash burst against her vision. Her breath shortened. The scar on her ribs pulsed with heat. She turned and ran into the rain. The city lights spun. The noise blurred. Her lungs tightened as her breaths came sharp and uneven. She reached the private entrance to the penthouse tower, swiping her access card with trembling fingers. The door clicked open, and she stumbled inside, cold shaking dripping on the polished floor. She pressed her palms to her knees, trying to catch her breath, but her body was spiraling, her nerves firing painfully, Every time she inhaled too sharply, she sank against the wall, sliding to the ground. Tears mixed with rain until she could not tell which was which. Upstairs, Elias ended another brutal meeting, rubbing the back of his neck. His assistant had been updating him about the rapidly shifting online sentiment, TikTok commentators diagnosing his marriage paparazzi. Speculation hashtags trending with her name. He hated all of it. The noise, the opinions, the invasion. And he hated that he couldn't stop it without igniting something worse. He walked toward the living area, planning to pour himself a glass of water and regroup before the next crisis call, when he heard the elevator chime. It was early for her to be back. He moved toward the foyer where droplets of rainwater streaked the marble. Maya stood just inside the doorway, hunched slightly, shaking her soaked coat, clinging to her frame. Her hair was plastered to her face, her lips pale, her eyes wide in shock. She looked like someone who had been running from something dangerous. Elias stepped toward her instinctively. "Maya, what happened?" She lifted her head slowly, tears streaming down her face, mixing with rain. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered, voice cracking. "I just wanted coffee." Elias closed the distance between them, his breath catching at the sight of her trembling. He hesitated a second before gently placing his hands on her shoulders, guiding her fully inside. "You're freezing. Come here." Maya let out a sob she had been holding in for hours. "I didn't ask for any of this, Elias. I didn't ask to be seen or judged or torn apart online. I just wanted to disappear today." Her voice broke on the last word. Elias reached for his coat, draped over a nearby chair, and wrapped it around her shoulders carefully. The fabric was warm from his body heat, and she instinctively pulled it close. His hands shook slightly as they adjusted the collar, and she noticed but didn't mention it. "Let's get you warm," he said softly. She nodded, unable to speak. He led her to the living area, where she sat on the edge of the couch, gripping the coat tightly around herself. Elias crouched in front of her, scanning her face, watching the panic trembling under her skin. Maya blinked through tears. "They called me unwanted. They said I must be hiding something wrong with me." She swallowed hard. Maybe they're right. Something in Elias snapped at those words, a quiet, controlled fury rising in his chest. "No." His voice was low, but firm, more certain than anything he had said in years. "They don't know you. They don't know anything about you." She looked at him, disbelief swimming in her eyes. "You don't know me either." He exhaled slowly, acknowledging the truth. "No, but I want to." The admission hung in the air, heavier than the storm outside. Maya brought a trembling hand to her face, wiping away rain and tears. "Why, Elias? Why would someone like you want to know someone like me? I have done nothing but bring trouble." He sat beside her, leaving that familiar few inches of space, but his presence felt closer than ever. "Trouble comes from the world, not from you," he said gently. Maya looked down, gripping the coat tighter. She shivered, feeling her scar sting beneath the wet shirt. Elias noticed the wince. "Are you hurt? It's just the nerves," she murmured. The rain made it worse. Elias wanted to touch her arm again, to steady her, but fear of crossing a line kept his hand frozen in place. Instead, he stood abruptly. "You need something warm to eat. Sit here." He walked to the kitchen and returned minutes later with a bowl of soup, steaming lightly. When he set it on the coffee table, she stared at it for a long moment before whispering, "You cooked this?" He shook his head, heated it up. "I'm no chef." She managed the smallest laugh, fragile but real. Her hands still shook when she lifted the spoon. Elias watched silently, making sure she was steady. When she finished, she rested her bowl on her lap and whispered the truth she had been keeping locked inside. "I am scared, Elias. I don't know how to exist in a world that punishes you for surviving." He sat down, letting his shoulder lightly touch the armrest to give her space, yet stay close. "I know," he said quietly. She looked at him confused. He continued, "Surviving has a cost. It changes the way you breathe, the way you trust, the way you wake up." Maya exhaled shakily. "You understand more than you admit." Elias nodded. "More than I want to." Thunder rolled outside, a deep rumble that vibrated through the glass walls. In that moment, something shifted between them, not dramatic, not loud, but real, a breaking of distance carved by fear. Maya pulled the coat tighter around herself and leaned slightly closer, letting their silence feel less like a wall and more like a bridge. Elias looked at her with a depth he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Maya lifted her eyes, and for the first time since the wedding, she said his name softly. "Elias." He inhaled sharply. "Yes, thank you for letting me in tonight." He swallowed hard. "You don't have to thank me." But she shook her head gently. "I do. You could have stayed away, but you didn't." A single tear slipped down her cheek, but this one did not come from pain. It came from relief. When the storm outside intensified pounding against the glass walls, Maya did not flinch, and Elias did not move away. They sat there in the faint lamplight, two bruised spirits learning the shape of something fragile and new in the quiet space between fear and trust. The storm lingered long into the night, as though the sky itself refused to let go of everything unsettled below. Rain beat softly against the floor to ceiling windows, filling the penthouse with a steady, rhythmic pulse. Maya remained on the couch, wrapped in Elias's coat long after her breathing had steadied. Her hair had dried into soft waves, her cheeks still flushed from crying, but her eyes clearer than they had been in days. Elias rose only when she seemed strong enough to sit without trembling. "I should get you a blanket," he murmured, his voice low, almost shy. Maya nodded, and he stepped into the hallway, his footsteps echoing lightly. When he returned, he carried a folded gray blanket and laid it across her lap with great care. She pulled it around herself, grateful for the warmth. The lamplight softened the sharp angles of the room, turning glass and chrome into something gentler. Elias lingered for a moment, watching her settle into the blanket before he straightened. "I have more calls to finish," he said quietly. "I will be in my office." He started to turn away, but Maya's voice stopped him. "You don't have to work right now. You haven't had a moment to breathe all day." He hesitated, hand resting on the back of the chair. "Every crisis feels like it needs me immediately," he admitted, but his voice lacked conviction. She tilted her head, studying him. "And what about you, Elias? What do you need?" He looked at her as if the question startled him. "I don't know," he said honestly. She nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "Then maybe start with sitting down." He exhaled quietly and returned to the couch, settling on the opposite side, leaving a respectful distance as always. The storm outside softened into a whisper. The penthouse was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city below. After a few minutes of silence, Maya shifted slightly, her side throbbing from the earlier panic. She winced, drawing her hand to her ribs. "The pain again?" Elias asked, noticing immediately. "It will pass," she said. "It always does, eventually." He watched her carefully, tension forming between his brows. Would you like some water tea? I can get something. She shook her head. Just sitting here is fine. Sitting there with you. Elias felt something in his chest loosen at her words, something that had been tight for years. The hours passed quietly until the digital clock on the wall read just after midnight. Elias stood. Let me walk you to your room. It was something a husband might say, but spoken with the caution of someone who feared crossing a boundary. Maya rose slowly, her legs still heavy from the storm of emotion. As they walked down the hallway, the lights dimmed automatically, casting warm shadows along the walls. When they reached the guest room door, Maya paused her hand on the knob. Elias stood just an arm's length away, the distance between them thick with everything unsaid. Tonight helped, she whispered. I haven't felt safe in a long time. You did that for me. Elias swallowed, feeling the weight of her gratitude, like a fragile glass he dared not drop. I didn't do much. You were the one who came back in the rain. She shook her head. But you opened the door, and you stayed. Their eyes met soft and searching. A warmth sparked between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Maya gently opened her bedroom door, preparing to step inside when a sharp cry pierced the hallway. Elias jerked as though struck. His breath caught his entire body seizing. Maya froze. Fire! Elias gasped, voice strangled. She's still inside. The hallway lights flickered, as if reacting to his panic. Elias pressed a hand to the wall, steadying himself, eyes unfocused, chest heaving. Maya had never seen him like this, raw, terrified, trapped in a memory that was not here. Elias, she whispered, stepping closer. Elias, look at me. But he was far away, trapped in the burning apartment, the night he lost everything. Flames, smashing glass. His fiancée's scream. Maya reached out her hand, slowly, careful not to startle him. Elias, it's Maya. You're home. You're safe. There is no fire. He shook his head, breaths shallow. I couldn't save her. I tried. His voice cracked, and it felt like the whole penthouse trembled with the sound. Maya stepped closer until she was standing right in front of him, gently touching his forearm. Her hand was warm, steady, real. Elias blinked hard, as if surfacing from deep water. His gaze finally focused on her, trembling in the dim light. Maya, he whispered, voice fractured. She nodded, her eyes full of empathy. I'm here, I'm right here. For a long moment, they simply breathed in the same small space, the terror draining slowly from his eyes. Then something unguarded broke in him, and he reached for her, pulling her into a desperate embrace. Maya stiffened in shock, at first his arms around her, a warmth she had not felt in so long. But then she softened, letting herself lean into him, letting the coat of fear she always wore fall away for just a second. His heartbeat banged against her cheek. His grip loosened when he realized he was holding her. I shouldn't, he whispered, voice trembling as he released her. I'm sorry. Maya shook her head gently. No, you needed it. He took one unsteady step back. I didn't mean to frighten you. You didn't. Elias ran a hand through his hair, breath shaky. I'm sorry. I don't want you to see me like that, she whispered softly. We all have nights that destroy us. It's okay to let someone witness it. Elias closed his eyes, taking in her words like a balm he had never allowed himself before. Maya looked into his face, illuminated by the warm hallway light, and for the first time she saw not the billionaire, not the widower, but the man inside the grief. She made a decision without thinking, without overanalyzing, without fear. Slowly she reached for the zipper of her thick wool cardigan and pulled it down. Elias's eyes widened. Maya, you don't have to. It's all right, she whispered. I'm only changing into something dry. She stepped backward into her room, leaving the door gently ajar. She removed the wet cardigan, revealing the thin cotton shirt beneath, clinging to her skin. Then she tugged the shirt up and over her head to replace it with a dry one. As she turned her back, the soft light fell across the long, jagged burn that stretched from her lower ribs up toward her shoulder blade. Elias stood frozen in the hallway, unable to move, unable to breathe. The scar glowed faintly under the lamp, its shape terrifyingly familiar, like the burn pattern he once saw on his fiancée's arm the night of the fire. Something in him shattered. He inhaled, but the breath caught. Maya turned slightly, realizing he had not walked away. She looked over her shoulder, her voice cracking. "This is what people would judge if they ever saw me. But you asked what hurt me, so here it is." Elias shook his head slowly, his eyes burning with something like horror and grief and anger woven together. "Who hurt you like this?" Maya searched his face. "The man who pushed me down the stairwell," she said quietly. "He left me there when the fire alarms went off. My body was burned by the hot metal railing and the electrical sparks when the wiring failed. No one came for a long time." Elias's hand braced against the doorway, his face paling. Maya lowered her gaze, ashamed. "I understand if this changes how you see me." He stepped forward, not touching her but close enough she could feel his breath. "No." His voice was low, rough. "It changes how I see the world that let this happen to you." She blinked, tears filling her eyes. Elias closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself before whispering the words that came from the deepest part of him. "You survived something someone else caused. Please do not apologize for your scars." Maya exhaled, trembling. "No one has ever said that to me." Elias opened his eyes, meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart trip. "Whoever did this to you," he said quietly, "he should be the one afraid." Maya felt the truth of his words, like a warmth spreading through her chest. In that moment, the world outside disappeared. Two broken people, two nights of trauma colliding, two hearts too scared to touch, yet pulled together by something real. Maya stepped back into the doorway, her new dry shirt in hand. Elias looked at her not with pity, not with hesitation, but with recognition. The kind that only happens when someone has finally seen the truth. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The soft hallway light carved gentle shadows along Maya's face, while Elias stood frozen, as if the sight of her scar unlocked a door in him he had kept bolted shut for years. She held the dry shirt in her hands, unsure what to do next, unsure if she had just crossed a line she could never return from. But Elias did not look away. His breath shook, his jaw tightened with a kind of restrained anguish. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, cracked, and unbearably human. "Tell me the truth, all of it." She swallowed, eyes flicking toward the floor. "You don't want to hear this, I do." He stepped back, giving her space, as if afraid to trap her, yet unwilling to leave. Maya exhaled slowly, then walked to the bed, sitting at the edge. Elias remained at the doorway, leaning one shoulder against the frame, his posture tense but open. The storm had quieted outside, but the air in the room now felt heavier, charged with something deeper than fear. Maya traced the seam of her shirt with trembling fingers, then looked up. "I used to be an art student," she began, her voice soft. "I had a scholarship and 2 part-time jobs, and this tiny apartment with brick walls I painted on." She let out a small laugh, devoid of humor. "I used to think life was hard back then." Elias listened quietly, his breathing shallow. One night, she continued, I was at a party for a professor. Nothing fancy, just wine cheap snacks music. I left early. She paused. A guy from campus followed me. I didn't think anything of it. We walked the same direction sometimes. Her throat tightened, but when we reached the stairwell, he pushed me. Hard. I hit the steps, couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. Elias's fingers curled into a fist slowly, but he stayed silent, urging her to continue. The fire alarms went off in the building. Something electrical shorted on the lower floors. He panicked. She blinked rapidly, holding back the memory. He left me there. The wiring on the wall beside me sparked. The metal railing heated. I tried to crawl, but my side touched it. She pressed a hand to her ribs, as if feeling the burn all over again. I remember the smell first, burning fabric, burning skin. Elias's breath hitched visibly. Maya swallowed hard. Eventually someone found me, not him, a stranger. I woke up in the hospital weeks later. No visitors, no police follow-up. They lost the report somehow, and the man who did it. Elias asked, his voice dangerously soft. Gone, moved, connections, money. I was insignificant enough to forget. Elias closed his eyes briefly, as if physically dizzy from the weight of her words. When he looked at her again, the emotion in his gaze was raw grief and fury braided together. Maya looked down ashamed, though she had no reason to be. I know him difficult to look at, she whispered. I know him damaged in ways that aren't just skin deep. Elias shook his head sharply, stepping inside the room as if compelled by something stronger than hesitation. You are not difficult to look at. She let out a bitter breath. Elias stepped closer. Maya, look at me. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she lifted her gaze to meet his. He looked right into her, not flinching, not turning away. What I saw, he said softly, wasn't something to fear. It was something someone survived. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He continued, You are not your scars, and you are not what someone did to you. She swallowed, eyes glassy. Then her voice softened to a trembling whisper. What about you, Elias? What ghosts do you carry? He froze for a moment as if the question hit a place he avoided. But Maya held his gaze steady, waiting. He had asked for her truth. Now she asked for his. He sank slowly onto the edge of the dresser, lowering himself to her height, his hands clasped together via elbows resting on his knees. When he spoke, it was barely above a whisper. I was supposed to marry her. She was kind, quiet. She painted too strangely enough. We lived in a small loft with bad wiring and old appliances. She loved it. I pretended to. His jaw clenched. The night she died, there was a fire in the kitchen. Electrical, fast. He shook his head, eyes distant. I tried to reach her. But when the ceiling beam fell, I couldn't. The firefighters pulled me back. I fought them. I fought until I collapsed. Maya watched him closely, her heart twisting. It wasn't your fault. Elias looked at her sharply. But it was. We knew the building was unstable. I knew. And I didn't get her out in time. Maya moved closer instinctively, not touching him but reducing the distance, until their knees almost brushed. Survivor's guilt, she whispered. He stared at her as if she spoke a language he had forgotten. It's not guilt over surviving, she added gently. It's guilt over hurting, and guilt over failing to save someone you loved. He swallowed thickly. She rested her hands in her lap, fighting the urge to reach out. You carry ghosts, Elias, but you are not haunted to me. You are hurting. They sat in silence for a long moment, sharing the quiet like a fragile offering. When Elias finally lifted his head, Maya saw something shift in his expression. A crack in the armor, a softening in the stone. He stood slowly. Maya held the dry shirt to her chest. Elias looked at it, then back to her. "You should change," he said quietly. "It'll give you privacy." She nodded. "Thank you." He started to leave, but paused at the doorway, turning back. His voice was soft, rough around the edges. "Maya, if you ever want to talk again, or if you need someone to sit with you while you remember, I'll be here." She inhaled unsteady. "And if you wake from another nightmare," she whispered, "I'm here too." His eyes softened with something like gratitude or maybe longing. He gave a small nod, then stepped out, letting the door close softly behind him. Maya sat there, holding the dry shirt close to her chest, overwhelmed, but lighter than she had been in a long time. Her scars had been seen fully for the first time, and instead of running, Elias had listened, stayed, and offered his own broken pieces in return. 2 ghosts, 2 wounds, 2 truths now shared. And something delicate had begun to root in the space where fear once lived. Maya woke the next morning with a rare feeling of clarity, the kind that comes after speaking truths buried too long beneath silence. Sunlight pushed through the sheer curtains in soft golden stripes, warming the room in a way she had not yet experienced in the penthouse. For a moment she allowed herself to lie still, listening to the distant hum of the city far below. The world felt gentler, quieter, more possible. She touched the edge of her scar through her shirt, no longer with shame, but with a strange calm. Last night had not healed her, but it had cracked something open, a shift that felt both terrifying and hopeful. She rose, showered, dressed slowly, and stepped into the hallway. The penthouse was filled with morning light, yet something in the air felt different, heavier. She assumed Elias was in his office until she heard the soft clatter of footsteps and low voices. She followed the sound to the kitchen where Elias and his assistant Claire stood over the kitchen island, staring at 2 tablets and a phone laid out like evidence in an investigation. Claire looked pale, her posture stiff. Elias's jaw was tight, his eyes burning with barely contained anger. Maya hesitated at the doorway. Elias looked up at her, instantly softening, though tension still clung to his posture. "Maya, we need to talk." She walked toward them slowly. Claire offered a sympathetic nod before tapping the screen of the nearest device. A video filled the display. Maya recognized the scene instantly. Her. Standing outside the cafe in the rain, her hood slipping back. Revealing part of her face, her expression panicked, frightened, raw. Someone had filmed her meltdown in the storm. The caption read, "The billionaire's unwanted bride breaks down in public." Underneath, a comment section churned with cruelty. "She's hiding something. She looks unstable." This was definitely a pity marriage. Why would he marry someone like her? Maya felt her stomach drop, her throat closing. Elias stepped closer, as though prepared to catch her if she fainted. "There's more," he murmured. Claire hesitated before showing another screen, this time a clip from a talk show. A blonde woman in a sharp suit spoke with theatrical authority. "When a wealthy man marries suddenly and hides his bride, we have to ask what psychological dynamics are at play. She may be trauma-bonded or financially dependent. It is likely he's rescuing her for his own emotional compensation." The audience murmured in agreement. Maya's knees weakened. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "They don't know anything about me." Claire nodded, "But they think they do." Another notification blinked. A trending #Maya Harlow. Mystery began flashing across all platforms. A third screen displayed stock market numbers. Gray Biotech down nearly 5%. Headlines scrolled rapidly. Investors question Gray marriage decision. Public demands answers. Marriage timing suspicious. Fake marriage conspiracies rising. Maya blinked fast, trying to absorb the chaos. "This cannot be happening," she breathed. Claire touched Elias's arm. "You need to address this. Silence will hurt the company even more." Elias's voice hardened. "I'm not using my marriage as PR." Claire nodded understanding, but still stressed. "The board expects you to make a statement by end of day." Elias closed his eyes briefly, frustration clear. Then he turned to Maya. "I'm handling this," he said softly. "It's not your responsibility." The doorbell chimed, interrupting them. Elias stiffened. "Security's sending someone up," he muttered. Maya backed away instinctively. The elevator opened, and two members of Gray Biotech's board walked in dressed in immaculate suits with faces carved from disbelief and judgment. This was unannounced. Elias stepped forward, blocking their view of Maya. Mr. Gray once said, cutting straight to business, "The public is demanding answers. Investors are panicking. This marriage has created instability. We need you to clarify the nature of this relationship." The other added sharply, "The company cannot afford distractions." "Who is she?" Elias clenched his jaw. "She's my wife." "A marriage of convenience," one of them pressed. "Strategic partnership." The phrasing sliced Maya's chest open. Elias opened his mouth to respond, but Claire shot him a warning look. Anything he said would be twisted. Maya stepped farther back until her spine touched the wall, her breath turning shallow. The board members continued speaking over each other. The PR backlash could be catastrophic. "She doesn't fit the profile. You need credibility, not sympathy." She heard every word, every implication, every hidden insult. Elias's voice finally cut through. "That's enough." But it did nothing to stop the bullet that had already hit her. She felt small, invisible, a problem to be managed instead of a person surviving her own nightmares. When the board left, Elias turned to Maya, immediately stepping toward her. "Maya," but she lifted her hand, stopping him. Her voice trembled. "I don't belong in your world." Elias's forehead creased with pain. "That's not true." But she shook her head, unable to breathe, past the ache in her chest. "I tried to stay quiet, to stay out of the way, to not make anything harder. But no matter what I do, I am wrong. A liability, a burden, a headline." His face twisted with anguish. "You are not a burden. You are my wife." "On paper," she whispered, "not in any real way." Her voice cracked. "And I understand that. But I won't let your whole company fall apart because I exist." He stepped closer, voice rough. "It's not because you exist, Maya. It's because people are cruel." She wiped a tear with the back of her hand. "Yes, and they will always be cruel to someone like me." That sentence cut him deeper than anything the board had said. Maya walked past him, gently placing the coffee mug she had been holding onto the counter. Her hands shook. "I need to go lie down for a moment." Elias moved to follow her, but she shook her head again. "Please, just let me breathe." She walked down the hallway, disappearing into her room. Elias remained in the kitchen, fists clenched, unable to move, unable to breathe past the guilt tearing through him. Claire touched his shoulder gently. "You need to talk to her before this gets worse," Elias whispered. "I know." But in his heart he feared he already knew how much damage the viral storm had done. Maya stayed in her room for nearly an hour, but she did not rest, and she did not breathe as easily as she hoped. She paced the floor with arms wrapped around herself. trying to understand how a simple life with quiet mornings and stolen glimpses of healing had turned into a spectacle for millions of strangers. Her phone buzzed nonstop, on the nightstand notifications growing like a swarm. She finally picked it up and saw her name trending again in bold red letters. A thread dissecting her scar, another post claiming she faked her trauma for sympathy. Someone had dug up an old photo from her college days, calling her unrecognizable now. Her vision blurred. She dropped the phone onto the bed and pressed her palms to her eyes. She had survived physical pain before, but humiliation this public? This relentless was a different kind of burn. A burn that didn't blister skin, but carved into bone. When she finally stepped out of the room, the penthouse was dimmer, the afternoon clouds rolling across the skyline. She heard Elias in his office pacing the floor, his voice tight and sharp. No statements, nothing until I speak to her first. Then a pause. No, she is not a problem to fix. She is my responsibility. Another pause, a shorter one. Then his tone hardened. No, she will not be paraded in front of cameras like a product. I said no. The call ended abruptly, and he emerged from the office, loosening his tie, running a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted and furious, and more human than any billionaire headline could ever capture. When he saw Maya, he stopped breathing for a moment. Maya. He said her name like it was a fragile thing he could break with volume. She kept a careful distance, standing near the marble kitchen island, her fingers brushing the cool surface, grounding herself. Her voice was steady but quiet. We need to talk. Elias exhaled as though bracing himself. Yes, we do. She swallowed, feeling the weight of everything pressing on her lungs. She tried to gather her thoughts into something coherent, but the words tangled between fear and exhaustion. I know things are bad for the company, she began. And for you. I know I never should have been in that video or let myself be seen like that. His head snapped up. Stop. Don't blame yourself for any of this. But she shook her head. People think you married me out of pity. They think you are weak. They think I am unstable. They think I am a charity case. Elias's jaw tightened. They can think whatever they want. I do not care. But that was a lie, and they both knew it. His company was bleeding. His board was circling like vultures. Investors questioned his judgment, and she was the trigger. Maya stepped closer, her voice trembling but controlled. What if I take a break from staying here just for a little while? Until things calm down. Elias's eyes widened, something flickering in them, fear or anger or both. No, absolutely not. She forced herself to continue. It is not forever, just long enough for your company to stabilize, for the headlines to move on, for people to stop looking at me like a scandal, for the board to stop pressuring you. His breathing shifted uneven. You think leaving will solve any of this? It won't. It will only make them think we are hiding something. She held her ground. Let them think whatever they want. At least it stops hurting you. He stepped forward, frustration spilling into his voice. And what about you, Maya? Her voice almost cracked. I will be fine. He flinched at the emptiness in those words. You won't be fine alone, he whispered. And neither will I. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. Then say it. Say you want me here for something more than a contract. Say you want me for you, not for convenience, not because of obligation, not because of guilt. Say it, and I will stay. Elias opened his mouth, but the truth inside him was tangled with fear. He loved the way she softened the penthouse with her presence. He felt alive when she smiled. He slept better when he knew she was just a room away. But love had burned him before. Love had killed someone once. And that ghost still wrapped its hands around his throat. So instead of honesty, instead of vulnerability, instead of choosing her, he said the worst possible combination of words. Maybe it is better if you take some time away. The silence that followed was not silence at all. It was a shattering. Maya blinked slowly, as if trying to understand whether she heard him correctly. His expression shifted instantly, regret slamming into his features, but it was too late. The damage was done. She stepped back, her breath hitching. Better for who Elias felt the floor tilt beneath him. Maya, I did not mean it like that. She shook her head, tears beginning to fill her eyes. No, you meant it exactly like that. Her voice cracked. And it is okay, really. I knew this was coming. I knew I didn't belong here. Not in your world, not in your company, not in your life. Elias reached out instinctively. Maya, please. But she stepped away, as if the space itself had become fragile glass. I will pack a few things. She whispered it like a prayer, like a surrender. Elias felt something in his chest tear violently. Maya, no, wait, let me fix that. But she was already turning away, closing herself off from him completely. In her room, she packed quietly, methodically shaking hands, folding clothes that still carried faint traces of his laundry soap. When she returned to the living room, she placed her ring on the counter with trembling fingers. His breath stopped. Maya, she forced herself to meet his eyes for the last time. Do not worry. I know I am not enough for someone like you. And that is okay. She whispered, thank you for trying. Then she walked to the elevator, each step echoing like the end of something sacred. Elias ran after her, but the doors slid shut with a soft final chime, sealing the distance between them. Inside the elevator, Maya exhaled a single broken breath, and in the penthouse, Elias stood motionless, the world collapsing inward, knowing he had spoken the sentence that broke her. When the elevator doors closed on Maya, it felt as if the entire penthouse lost its oxygen. Elias stood rooted to the marble floor, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to process the enormity of what he had just done. The silence hit him before the grief did an echoing emptiness filling every corner like cold fog. He pressed his palms to his face, then dragged his hands through his hair, gripping at the roots, as if physical pain could pull him out of the nightmare he had created. Maya was gone, and he had been the one to push her away. The first hour passed in a haze. He paced the living room, replaying every word he had spoken, trying to find the moment when fear overtook sense, when trauma overtook truth, when guilt over the past crushed what he wanted in the present. He whispered her name into the empty air, hoping for something anything but. The penthouse swallowed the sound without mercy. The second hour hit harder. He opened the refrigerator, saw the small basket of berries she liked, saw the mug she used for tea, saw the plant she bought for the kitchen counter. He touched one leaf and felt it wilt under his fingers. He closed the fridge door forcefully, but the items remained imprinted on his mind. Small fragments of her, woven into the home he once believed was unchangeable. By the third hour, he walked into the guest room she had turned into a makeshift art nook. Her sketchbook sat open on the desk, a half-finished pencil, drawing still fresh. It was a portrait of him, not perfect, not detailed, but unmistakably him. A quiet version of him staring downward as if holding pain behind his eyes. She had captured his truth long before he dared speak it. His hand trembled as he touched the page. Night fell, He did not sleep. He sat in the living room on the couch where she once curled up and fell asleep when she was too tired to talk. He replayed her voice in his head. "You want me to leave. It is better if you take some time away." He heard himself say it and hated himself for giving fear more power than love, for letting his ghosts dictate the fate of someone who deserved gentleness. When dawn broke, his chest felt hollow, but his mind was clear. He grabbed his phone, heart hammering, and called her. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. He tried again. "Nothing," he texted her. "Please let me explain. Please, Maya, nothing." At noon, his assistant Claire arrived worried. She stepped inside and looked around the penthouse, immediately sensing something was wrong. "Elias, what happened?" He looked up, eyes red and distant. "She's gone." Claire's expression softened. "You let her leave?" He swallowed. "I pushed her away." Claire sat across from him, steady and calm. "Tell me what you said." Elias stared at the floor. "I told her maybe she should take some time away." Claire closed her eyes painfully. That sentence. Elias nodded slowly, feeling sick. "It broke her. I saw it break her in real time." Claire leaned forward. "Then go get her." Elias rubbed his shoulders. "She won't answer." "I don't know where she went." Claire tapped her fingers, thinking. "She does coffee. She likes warm, small spaces. She is quiet, but she observes everything. She needs places that feel safe." She glanced around the cold penthouse. "Not this place. Look at what this home is. Glass, steel, shadows. No wonder she ran." Elias's voice cracked. "I never meant to hurt her." Claire softened. "Then find someone who can tell you how not to repeat the same mistakes." She stood, grabbed her coat, and left him with one lingering look of pity and encouragement. "You have to fight for her before the world teaches her you won't." After she left, Elias wandered through the penthouse again, but this time everything felt sharper. He saw the plate she used for breakfast, the cushion she always adjusted, the blanket she wrapped around her shoulders on cold mornings. Every detail stabbed him with regret. That night he tried to sleep, but failed. Instead, he walked through the city in the rain hoodie, up hands in pockets, head down, like a man exiled from his own life. He ended up standing outside a tiny cafe where he had once seen couples hold hands through difficult conversation. Maya would have liked this place. It was warm, amber-lit, intimate. He stood outside for a long time, imagining her inside, safe, smiling, sipping something sweet. By the second night, he had reached his breaking point. He returned to the penthouse and for the first time walked into what was once her bedroom. He sat on the edge of her empty bed, inhaling the faint scent of lavender and paint. On her pillow he found a small folded piece of paper he had never noticed before. His chest tightened. He opened it carefully. It was a sketch. Him again, but this time he was reaching for someone whose form faded off the edge of the page. She had drawn a hand reaching back. Hers. A single sentence at the bottom. "I don't know if I can be loved, but I wanted to try." His vision blurred. He pressed the sketch to his forehead, choking on his breath. He whispered her name over and over. It felt like begging. On the morning of the 3rd day, Martha, the director of his charity foundation, arrived unannounced. She stepped into the penthouse, her steps deliberate, her eyes sharp enough to cut through the fog suffocating him. Elias looked up, exhausted. "Martha." She crossed her arms. "You look like you have not slept in years." He swallowed. "It has been 72 hours. Martha studied him carefully, then spoke with gentle authority. "Let me tell you what I see. a man terrified not of losing a company, but of losing someone who finally made this place feel alive. He stared at her, stunned by how precisely she understood. "And let me tell you what else I see," she continued. "You are not afraid of Maya's scars. You are afraid because she survived what your first fiancé did not. You are afraid because if you love her, you might lose her too." Elias's breath broke. Martha stepped closer, softening. "You do not fear her. Maya scares you because she is alive. And loving someone alive feels like a risk you do not know how to take anymore. But love is the only thing worth risking for, the only thing that makes survival more than luck." Elias closed his eyes as the truth pierced him. Martha rested a hand on his shoulder. "So go. Leave the meetings, leave the board, leave everything, and go find her." He opened his eyes, determination rising like fire beneath his ribs, where Martha smiled knowingly. "If I were young, trying to disappear, trying to breathe after heartbreak, I would find a small job in a small cafe in a city big enough to hide me, the kind with warm lights and late hours." Elias grabbed his coat, his keys, his resolve. He looked once more at the sketch Maya left behind and tucked it into his pocket like a compass pointing him home. Then he walked out the door with a single purpose pounding in his chest: find Maya. Maya had been working the closing shift for 3 weeks at the little cafe tucked between a used bookstore and a laundromat in downtown Boston. And every night she told herself the same lie, that she was fine now that she was gone, that the silence in this new city felt cleaner than the silence in his penthouse, that brewing lattes for college students and tired nurses made her feel human again, even though every time the door chimed, her heart lurched as if expecting a ghost. The cafe was warm against the early winter wind, humming with low conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. Her hands moved on muscle memory, tamping grounds, steaming milk, painting tiny leaves on cappuccinos, while her mind drifted through every sentence she wished she never heard from Elias, and every sentence she wished she had the courage to say back. She told herself she was rebuilding. She told herself she was breathing. But she never told herself she had stopped hurting. At 7:43, a gust of wind swept in when someone held the door too long, and Maya looked up instinctively, ready to tell them to close it quickly. Then her grip loosened, the milk pitcher slipped from her fingers and hit the counter with a metallic clatter. The entire cafe turned toward the doorway, where Elias Gray stood, framed by the cold Boston evening, his coat unbuttoned, his hair tousled by wind, his eyes searching with a frantic, glassy determination that did not belong to the man who had once spoken in careful, controlled tones, as if everything in life could be negotiated like a contract. For 2 full seconds no one moved. Then whispers rippled across the cafe as people recognized the billionaire who had been on the news all week, the man tied to rumors of a broken marriage and a runaway bride, the silent center of a viral storm that would not die. Maya felt her lungs seize, not from fear, but from the shock of seeing him stripped of the armor he always wore. Elias took one step, then another, boots, scraping the floor until he stood in the center of the room where all eyes were on him, and none of that seemed to matter because his gaze was locked only on her. "Maya," he said, not loud, not soft, just steady enough for every person in the cafe to hear the weight behind her name. She swallowed her breath, bracing for anger or blame or cold apology. Instead, Elias exhaled a tremor and said, "I hurt the woman I love because I was afraid." A hush fell so deep, even the espresso machine seemed to pause. I thought if I kept my heart locked, nothing could burn again, he continued, voice raw, not polished, not prepared, but the real unguarded thing. But I was wrong. Being without you is its own kind of fire. Maya felt the sting behind her eyes, but she stayed rooted in place, terrified of believing too quickly. Elias stepped forward, not touching, not demanding, just offering himself to the moment. I cannot promise to be perfect, and I cannot promise that the world will stop talking. But I can promise that I am done being afraid. I choose you, not as a contract, not as a shield, as a man choosing the woman who made him feel alive again. A customer near the window whispered, "This is real, right?" as if witnessing something too intimate to be fully processed. Maya gripped the edge of the counter, her pulse thundering in her ears. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked before a single word escaped. Elias raised his hand, palm open, not reaching, just waiting. I am not asking you to come back out of pity or pressure. I am asking you because you are the first person I have loved since the fire, and the only person I want beside me when the world goes dark or bright or anything in between. Maya finally stepped out from behind the counter, her knees unsteady, her breath uneven, but her resolve stronger than her fear. When she stopped in front of him, the cafe was so quiet, the city outside felt miles away. I left because I thought I was the burden, she whispered. I thought you regretted choosing me. Elias shook his head slowly, painfully. I regretted hiding. I regretted letting fear speak for me, never you. He extended his hand again, a simple gesture trembling with meaning. Come home with me, Maya. I do not promise comfort, I promise truth. Maya looked at his hand, then at his face, the man who once froze at the sight of her scars, now standing in front of a crowd, willing to expose his own. She placed her hand in his, and the room erupted in soft applause. Not loud, not chaotic, but warm like a quiet blessing. Elias closed his eyes for a second, as if steadying the moment inside his chest. Maya squeezed his hand just once, a promise forming between them without words. 6 months later, the house by the main coastline breathed with a kind of quiet that did not feel empty or cautious, but gently earned, as if the walls themselves understood what it meant to hold two people, learning how to live without flinching. The mornings smelled of sea salt drifting through open windows and fresh coffee warming the kitchen, while sunlight pooled across the wooden floors in wide, calm patches. Maya woke each day before Elias, not out of fear of disturbing him, but out of habit from a life where she had always had to stay ahead of pain. Now she rose because dawn gave her something she thought she had lost forever: space, to create without hiding. The old sunroom had become her studio, filled with canvases lined against the wall, and the faint sound of waves against the shore. Today she stood before a new painting, one she had been shaping for months. A sweeping stroke of dark blue night, a figure standing in fractured light, one hand reaching toward something unseen. She called it "The Night He Saw Me," because that was the moment everything changed, the moment his eyes softened, not with horror, but recognition. Elias stepped into the doorway, barefoot hair mussed by sleep, eyes soft in that way they only were when he looked at her in the early morning glow. "You have that look," he murmured, "the one that means you are almost finished." Maya smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe, or maybe it is the first time I am painting without fear." Elias crossed the room slowly, always moving with a deliberate gentleness, he had taught himself over the months. Touch had been a battlefield for both of them. Nightmares still found him, sometimes flames flickering in his sleep, but now she woke him by placing her hand on his wrist, grounding him with calm certainty. And Maya, though she no longer hid, her scars still had moments when a sudden memory tightened her breath. But they had built rituals to navigate the dark, a lantern left on during storms, a hand pressed lightly on the kitchen counter to say, "I am here," a kiss to the shoulder before sleeping, to say I am not leaving. Elias stepped behind her, his breath warm against her neck, as he studied the painting. "It is beautiful," he said, but his voice softened into something deeper. "You are beautiful." Maya turned, meeting his eyes, letting the words settle instead of shrinking away from them the way she once did. She wore a sleeveless top this morning, the first one she had ever dared to wear in daylight, the long, jagged scar along her side catching a streak of sun like gold leaf. She waited to see if Elias would look away for even a second. He did not. Instead, he lifted his hand, carefully stopping a breath away, until she nodded, then tracing the edge of her scar with the quiet reverence of someone touching a sacred page. "This is the part of you that survived," he whispered, and his lips brushed softly against the skin that once made her fold into herself with shame. Maya leaned into him, not to hide, but to share the weight of the moment. Outside, gulls called over the shoreline, and waves climbed the rocks in steady rhythm. The world felt wide and possible. Later, they sat on the porch with blankets around their legs and hot tea in their hands, watching the sun melt into the horizon. Streaks of orange and pink lit the sky, reflecting off the water until everything shimmered. Maya rested her head on Elias' shoulder, feeling the rise and fall of his breath, the quiet strength of a man who had chosen to face fear rather than run from it. "Do you ever regret any of it?" she asked softly, not out of insecurity, but curiosity born from healing. Elias pressed a kiss to her temple, lingering there. "Every day I regret the time I wasted being afraid," he said, "but loving you never." Maya closed her eyes, letting those words settle into the places that once felt unreachable. The scars on her skin warmed under the fading sun, turning gold as the last light of day touched them, as if the universe itself insisted on illuminating every piece of her that had ever been hidden. Two hearts that had once lived in the shadows now rested in open light, not perfect, not painless, but alive in a way neither had imagined possible. When a story ends with healing, it does not truly end at all. It simply shifts into the hearts of the people who listened and carried its light forward. So if you are here now watching the final moments of Maya and Elias' journey, I want to speak directly to you, because their story is not just a romance. It is a reminder of something real, something we often forget when life feels heavy or when our own scars feel too deep to show. Maybe you are like Maya, someone who has spent years hiding the parts of yourself that once saved your life but left their marks. Maybe you are like Elias, trapped between the fear of loving and the fear of losing until both become cages. Or maybe you are simply someone who came here looking for a story and stayed because somewhere between the lines, something in this journey whispered to a quiet place inside you. Whatever brought you here this moment is for you. If this story touched you even a little, if it reminded you that love can return, even after fire, even after heartbreak, even after silence, I invite you to take a breath and carry that reminder with you. Healing is slow, trust is fragile, love is messy, But none of that makes it any less real or any less worth fighting for. And now I want to ask you something that truly helps this channel grow and tells me whether these stories should continue. If Maya and Elias' journey made your heart tighten or soften or pause for even a second, please take a moment to tell me in the comments below. Tell me where in the world you are watching from. Tell me what part struck you the most. Was it the wedding night he feared? Was it the moment she undressed and he froze not from desire but understanding? Was it the viral storm that nearly broke them, or the night he walked into that cafe and chose her in front of everyone? If you have ever loved someone despite your fear or healed from something that once tried to break you, your voice matters here. Your experience may become the spark for another story, another character, another journey that helps someone else feel seen. And if you have a moment, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It helps more than you know. It tells the algorithm that these stories are worth sharing, that the world needs more compassion, more romance, more narratives where scars are not hidden but honored. Also, if you want to support the channel directly, the simplest way is to leave a comment, even just an emoji or your city. YouTube pushes stories further when the conversation grows. And I truly read every single one. Before we close, I want to give you something to take with you into tomorrow. A small reminder wrapped gently in the spirit of Maya and Elias. You are not unlovable because of what you survived. You are not too broken to begin again. You are not too late or too flawed or too scarred for someone to see you and stay. The right people do not fear your shadows. They simply bring a light bright enough to walk with you through them. So wherever you are tonight, whatever you are facing, whatever scars you carry, visible or invisible, I want you to hear this clearly from me, from this channel, and from every story waiting to be told here. You deserve a love that does not flinch. You deserve a love that chooses you in daylight. You deserve a love that becomes a home. If this story moved you even a little, tell me in the comments and join our growing family of listeners from all over the world. Your voice, your presence, your heart make this channel what it is. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for believing in stories where healing is possible, and thank you for being here exactly as you are.